The input function is a necessary tool that you can use to solicit input from the user. So as an example, here you see on the screen a input statement. You can optionally include a prompt, which will display on the screen, and it helps the user understand what is exactly you're asking for. If I run this, you'll see at the bottom here that Python is asking me for information. And if I type my name in and I hit return, I've successfully provided information for the program. But there's a problem with this format. Syntactically, it's fine. But the problem is that you have to have something on the left side of the function to capture, in effect, what the user enters. So it's necessary to add on the left side here name equals, so that I can, when I type in my name, I capture it in the variable name. Let's run this again, and this time let's actually print out the name so you can see the result. Again, I'm asked for my name, I type my name in, and I hit return, and the program returns my name. So we now know how we can actually ask the user for information and also capture that information to use it later. Now, by default, the input statement returns a string. And there are many cases, for example, in name, where that can be very useful. But a challenge more often is that you're going to be using numbers. You're going to want the user to enter a number. And this can cause a real problem. If you're asking the user for information and you want a number, that number must be explicitly converted to its appropriate type. You cannot use strings in numeric calculations. So if you ask the user for information and don't convert it, you'll get an error. Let's take a situation where you can see this in more detail. Here I'm asking the user for the temperature in Celsius. Now we all know, of course, the temperature in Celsius could be a float because temperature can have a decimal value. So if I ask the user for a temperature in Celsius and I don't explicitly convert it, the temperature in C will get a string. And again, I cannot use a string in a numeric calculation. So temperature in C will be a string, temperature in C here will be a string, and when I try to do a mathematical calculation, Python will throw an error. So let's see this actually occur. Enter the temperature in Celsius. Let's say it's 25 degrees Celsius, which is pretty warm. And I hit return, and you'll notice the error here. It says I can't multiply sequence of non-int of type float. Now, that's a bunch of gobbledygook. I understand that doesn't mean a lot to you at this point. But what it really means is that we attempted to use a string in a numeric calculation. To explicitly convert the user's input into a float, we can use the float function. If I wrap this around the input statement, temp in C will get a value of float, not string. So in the above now, temp in C will be a float, which I can safely use in a numeric calculation. So let's run this again. Enter the temperature in Celsius. Let's again use 25. And you'll see 25 degrees Celsius is 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a successful result. You'll also again notice my use of F strings, which I would strongly encourage you to review this example carefully so that you understand how this was successfully used to format the output. Now there are situations where you may not want a float, you might actually want an int. So let's take a look at that situation. Here I'm asking the user for information about an order, the person's name, the quantity, the unit price. Name, of course, will be a string. Now, since the name is a string, I don't need to convert it because it's already a string. And I'm not going to use, of course, name in any numeric calculation. Quantity, however, is going to be an integer. You buy whole value items, 2 shirts, 3 pairs of pants. So that's going to be an integer. Unit price, of course, is going to be a float because prices almost always have some decimal value. I then do the calculation of item cost, which is the quantity times the unit price, and then I print out the result using an F string. So let's see how this works. I run it, enter my name, enter the quantity, let's say 4, and the unit price, let's say, is $49.99. And if I type that in, again, you'll notice that the string, the integer, and the unit price in the form of a float is printed out in the right format. And you'll notice the dollar signs in the appropriate place as you would expect to see them for monetary values. Again, I encourage you to look through this print statement carefully so that you can understand how that F string works.